and welcome to this very special episode of Frankly Speaking. And tonight I have a guest who needs no introduction, Mr. Bill Gates himself. Thank you for joining me on Frankly Speaking, Mr. Bill Gates. Do you have a special place in your heart for India? Because India loves you, and we see you ever so often and talking about issues that India should deal with. India at this moment is also hosting the G20 presidency. How do you look at India on the world map of countries to watch out for?
Well, India is super important. In my Microsoft career, a lot of my colleagues came from India. Now Satya Nadella is doing a great job running Microsoft. For the foundation, the country that we've engaged with by far the most is India. And not only are we seeing great progress in India, but a lot of the things that are going well in India show us how we can go to the rest of the world and bring that same type of innovative progress.
What is your real interest on what you wrote about India? And you said India as a whole gives me hope for the future. It's about to become the world's most populous country. What is the hope that you're talking about?
Well, it's great to see that a democracy, even though it's chaotic, that it allows for multiple voices, and over time it picks leaders who care about the health system, who care about the education system. Slowly but surely, as the economy grows, the government has more resources for those things. And so it's the progress since I started foundation work here all the way back in the year 2000 has been phenomenal. I have a lot of charts that show things like childhood death, including measles, diarrhea, and those results are very exciting.
And do you think emphasis on these issues of health, poverty alleviation, of course we have miles to go, but do you think the pace at which India is tackling these issues is something that would be seen as satisfactory, progressive? How would you rate it?
Well, the progress is much faster than most developing countries, and that's why such good models are coming out. Obviously, China did a lot of development, but it did it in a very different way. There are some lessons from that. India now in health, the focus on foundational learning is a fairly new thing in the last few years. NIPPN, which is a really great program that we want to help accelerate the progress on that. So yes, India's, it's more than a glass half full in terms of the great work.
In India, the political discourse is rather shrill. Many people compare the pace of growth in the last 9 years and before that. Do you see any change in approach of governance, especially in the areas that we're talking about, in the last 9 years since the Modi government?
Well, the progress numbers I look at go all the way back to the year 2000, so there's been progress. I will say that the quality of the government staff involved in health work or education work or this digital work, including the financial services, that quality continues to go up. India has a number of great people. The fact that a lot of them are being picked to serve in key government roles, that's a big positive trend, really I'd say of the last 5 years in terms of my noticing that bodes well for the future.
Mr. Bill Gates, we've spoken about the pandemic experience. How do you think India handled the pandemic? Are there any lessons to be learned on what could be done better? And which were the areas where we did, as a country, perform well, better than expected?
Well, India did well compared to all countries in terms of making vaccines. We worked with partners like Serum to help them get going, but that resource was not only great for the country, but also for the world. the digital approach with COWIN, where you were able to see, okay, which communities were not accessing the vaccines. And then as we realized it was the elderly that we wanted to emphasize, then really trying to get them the coverage there, which is the greatest risk up. No country did a perfect job because, we didn't expect the pandemic, and so we were all scrambling to get going. Even the United States was quite a disappointment in terms of how prepared they were to scale up the diagnostics. And so there's a lot of great talk about, okay, we need better surveillance to catch these things earlier on. There's an initiative called One Health to see if something's coming from animals into human health and to get that really early. So I do think there are still great discussions about how we do better, both in India and at the global level.
Mr. Bill Gates, also you've spoken about preparing for the next pandemic, which sounds ominous, it sounds scary, to put it mildly. And you think that it's not going to be possibly as easy, if that's the word.
Damage. Pandemics don't come very often, and so we really let our guard down. We didn't know how to scale up the diagnostics. Even in the rich countries like the US that have so much in the way of resources in that health sector. And so the innovations now, okay, cheaper diagnostics that you can manufacture quickly, using digital approaches like the COWIN. I do think we will be a lot better prepared. The next 2 or 3 years, we can't forget the pandemic because we still have more work to do. I can't predict when the next pandemic will come, but because of the boundary between humans and nature, I don't think it'll be another 100 years. And so it really is worth investing. These investments are not gigantic to have the right standby capacity, just like for fires, where we know that they will come.
Mr. Gates, the issue of handling, you said no country handled perfectly the COVID situation. But do you think this zero COVID policy by China backfired? And do you believe that, the entire COVID pandemic was actually something that went horribly wrong in a Chinese lab?
We're going to be discussing, did we do too little lockdown, too much lockdown? Now that we know that young people weren't very susceptible, maybe schools should have continued, but what about the teachers? How do you deal with that? Academics really need to look at that data and help us understand that. China took a very different approach. They were able to suppress, even though the infection started there, they were able to suppress it. Most governments wouldn't be able to do that. Now it requires very strong measures to do that, and then later they decided to open up. They did benefit because by the time they opened up, they had some vaccination, and the strain at that point was a less damaging strain than we had earlier in the pandemic. But the origin, I don't bring anything new to that. I think it came across through animals, but there's lots of experts who will continue to debate that,
including those in the FBI.
Well, the U.S. government, I think of 6 departments, 3 say one thing, 3 say another. They say it with low confidence. So, I think lab safety is a good topic, but the most likely cause, and that we have to be ready for in the future, is that it comes across, like flu comes from birds and pigs, and so both require vigilance.
Mr. Bill Gates, you've been to the war room of the health minister back then in the COVID days. What was your experience and what did you notice, and do you think it was sort of managing the scale at which the pandemic was happening effectively. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, India used digital systems to get their very high coverage rate. India has, for middle-income countries, about the highest coverage rate. So that's a real achievement. The thing I'm most excited about is now we're taking those digital systems and we're applying into the health system to drive quality and visibility. That is very exciting.
And how does it rate to experiences of other countries?
Well, India did a lot of things well. The U.S., we've funded vaccine work, lots of money, and that helped out the world. India, with help from partners, was the big vaccine manufacturer. I think 4 companies, with Serum being by far the largest, did a really great job of ramping up. These vaccine companies are partners of our foundation because we've helped them create new vaccines, bring the price of the vaccines down. So we engaged with them very early on, and we can write checks very, very quickly. And so it was great to see that all come together.
No, and the digital surveillance, the whole digital piece that India moved, how does that also compare with the rest of the world?
Well, India ramped up the diagnosis very quickly. Australia did an amazing job where they got the diagnosis going so quickly, they avoided a lot of the infection. So they'll end up with a death rate, given that they have lots of old people, a much lower death rate than the other rich countries. So there's 3 or 4 things where India was among the best. Quick getting diagnostics out, which most of the rich countries didn't do. Australia really stands out in that respect. So, we're all seeing, okay, who did what well. But, the digital approach, the vaccine manufacturing, very strong grade for India.
Mr. Bill Gates, what would you worry about more? Forthcoming pandemics or climate change, which is a huge challenge? We can already feel it. The winters are getting shorter. In India, the summers are getting longer and longer. What kind of a challenge do you think climate change does hold for this part of the world?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time on my foundation health work, and the foundation's involved in making sure that people can adapt to these climate changes, including with better seeds. I was out seeing the great agricultural research here in India as part of this trip. I also, under the Breakthrough Energy brand, work on investing in innovations that are going to help us stop the emissions, so new ways of making cement or steel or electricity. So that's called mitigation. Climate, because it'll just get gradually worse and worse, and because what we have to change to get rid of emissions is so gigantic, it's one of the toughest problems we face. And India, because it's near to the equator, will be affected. These very high temperatures make it hard for the crops, make it hard to do outdoor work. And so it is a looming problem that requires global cooperation.
And 2070 as the net zero date, is it feasible to do it by then? And by then, will it be just too late?
Obviously, the rich countries need to lead. They have had the historic emissions, and they need to not only get their emissions to zero, but participate in an innovation ecosystem that allows India to do these things like cement and steel without having it cost a lot extra, what I call that the green premium, because India, Prime Minister Modi was with me in 2015. He named Mission Innovation, that said innovation is part of the solution. And in the last 8 years, that's really starting to kick in.
And do you think we're going fast enough as the world, as a global participant in the world? with tackling some of these emission norms? Is the world going fast enough?
No, because the deadline, usually when you're innovating and improving things, you can take your time. Here we have this goal of doing in the next 30 years a replacement of a lot of infrastructure. And, so we need to keep our attention on it. We have these yearly meetings. I'm making sure the innovation focus is in those meetings. We should never relax because of the scale involved. Getting ready for a pandemic doesn't require a ton of our resources, whereas the climate mission, you have to have sort of all of society seeing it as a priority.
Mr. Bill Gates, when you're not handling your foundation work, when you're not writing books, when you're not engaging with global leaders to find solutions to some of these large global issues, what does Mr. Bill Gates do?
Well, I have 3 children, and they're a great joy to me. The oldest got married last year and now's had my first grandchild. So
Grandpa Bill Gates.
Yeah.
And what do they call you?
Well, the child's young enough that we haven't figured that out yet. I'm looking forward to that. I play a lot of tennis. I read a lot. The world is fascinating. I'm always trying to learn new things. And I'm very lucky that I get to meet with lots of smart people to say, okay, what's going on in health? What's going on in education? So, I'm very, very lucky that I love my work and I love my friends and family.
And there are many reports about many other things in people that you love. Anything new happening in your life?
Oh,
you get written about a lot. Do you read some of that stuff?
I do.
You see it on social media getting so much attention, even your private life.
It comes with the territory, and I have a great life.
Great life? Not saying more?
Nothing more on that.
And the other 2 children?
My youngest is still in college. My middle child graduated last year, so they're good students, each with different interests. They keep me fresh because they're using technology in an even better way than I do.
So we have a Microsoft 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 coming up.
I wouldn't impose on them that they should work in software or try to build a big company.
Maybe hardware.
They each have their own passions. The oldest is at medical school, so that's exciting. The second one wants to help politics be smarter. We need
smart politicians
smart
as well.
Policy people, so we'll get some help there.
So all in all, are you in a good place?
Yes. I'm lucky. I've had 2 incredible careers, my Microsoft career, now my foundation and climate career. It's very fulfilling. Even this week, being here in India and seeing the energy and seeing the progress, seeing the quality of these activities all even better. It's been 4 years since I was here, and I was looking forward to getting back. Normally I come at least every year, but that was interrupted, and so now the progress I'm seeing is amazing.
Have you already met the Prime Minister, and what is your conversation with Prime Minister Modi like?
Well, he's very aware of the health progress, and he has a sense of urgency that I share. And so there's always lots to talk about. Looks like I will get to see him tomorrow. I really appreciate that.
And any special prescription for India that you have in mind for a discussion with him?
The top-level strategy of putting more resources into health and using innovation there, taking this foundational learning and making that a priority, and now saying, hey, India is going to share this. India is going to come up with low-cost models to solve many of these problems, and it wants the rest of the world to have access to that. This G20 it's very timely that the G20 is here, and seeing things like the digital finance, where India, in many respects, has done better than any other country.
So, Mr. Bill Gates, it's been a pleasure, and I hope you've enjoyed your visit to India as much as the media here has enjoyed covering you every step of the way. And we do hope we'll have you back in India sooner than later, and pandemics don't interrupt your regular relationship with India in terms of visits. Thank you very much for joining me on Frankly Speaking.
Fantastic.
Pleasure.
Thank you.